In the vast industry of video games, AAA companies are meant to be the pinnacle of gaming itself. In the past, games produced by these monolithic entities produced games and characters that have been at the forefront of studios themselves. Think Mario for Nintendo, Sonic for Sega, Crash Bandicoot for the original PlayStation, and of course Master Chief for Xbox. But now, only Nintendo appears to still hold strong to their original identity, as various mergers and acquisitions of companies have seen games from rival companies now operating on the same platform. The likes of Sonic being on a Nintendo console, which was completely unfathomable to me as a child growing up in the 90s, now is a reality and has become the norm. So while I believe it's a good thing for games to be accessible to everyone on any platform, this appears to have led to a shift in the industry, where making amazing flagship games for a particular gaming platform is no longer incentivized to gaming companies. So due to the far broader reach gaming companies now have, are AAA companies simply following the now failing Hollywood methodology of simply churning out content and paying the numbers game to turn big profits, instead of simply making high quality games? Recent results in the way gamers are turning off big studios in droves would indicate that this priority shift is certainly having a negative effect on their bottom line, and gamers themselves no longer view big gaming companies with the reverence they once enjoyed. Thanks to platforms such as Steam and Epic, gamers now have nearly endless choices when it comes to what kind of entertainment they want to spend their money on. Yet despite the abundance of options, it seems ridiculous that gaming companies continue to deliver titles that are either A, unfinished, as in the case of Cyberpunk, Diablo 4, etc. B, straight up suck. Suicide Squad is a prime example of this, of the most recent game. Cringeworthy stories and characters, Forspoken, enough said about the studio and what's happened there. And shouldn't have even been made to begin with. Consider a game like Redfall. What a joke that was. Seriously, like, what were they thinking? Couple that with the recent furor over Sweet Baby Inc. as well. So many gamers and people outside the industry, or that have an interest in it, will point to their influence as being the reason why a number of big titles have fallen well short of their hype and expectation recently, as well as costing big studios hundreds of millions of dollars. And to a certain extent, they've got a valid point. They have heavily involved in, of course, Suicide Squad being probably the most recent example, as well as a number of other games. And there's been enough spoken about it on the internet, with people now avoiding games that they're involved with because most of the titles just straight up suck, because the focus isn't on gameplay, it's on diversity and forcing stuff onto games that simply doesn't belong in most people's opinion. But whilst it's a valid point, the reality is actually, in my opinion, more depressing. So the big studios themselves are solely to blame for this. So have a think about it. Yes, Sweet Baby Inc. is a consultancy firm to force diversity and that sort of woke agenda into games, but companies themselves, do they really have a gun to their head forcing them to do this? I don't think so. And even if they did, it doesn't stop them from making a good game. So you can blame Sweet Baby Inc. all you want, and yes, they deserve their fair share of criticism. Their behaviour online has been mostly appalling, but have a think about it. Games have been going downhill for quite some time, and I would say the focus would be less on diversity, because you can still make diverse, great games, but there's a more sinister reason for it, which is of course monetization, but we'll get back to that soon. But basically, games themselves, AAA studios themselves have only got themselves to blame, because realistically they're the ones in charge of making the game, making the story, making a fun and addictive gameplay loop, keeping it challenging, keeping it timeless, or at least keeping the gamer wanting to come back for more. So the gamer's really going to care if there's a token black character in a game or there's a muscular guy wearing a dress? I don't think so. You only have to look at some of the stuff people come up with character design in Baldur's Gate 3 to know that gamers simply don't care about that kind of stuff. They just want fun and addictive gameplay, and I think AAA studios have simply forgotten how to deliver this, because their focus isn't on making great games. Their focus is primarily on monetization and pleasing shareholders, and that's where the problem is. So that's where a part of the problem is. And a symptom of that is, of course, storytelling. So one of the most loved and greatest titles of all time, which recently had a remake a few years ago to modernise the game and bring it up to modern gaming standards, and of course one of the original AAA titles was, of course, Final Fantasy VII. I remember playing this game. I was a Nintendo addict, but we borrowed a friend's PlayStation and we played it for weeks. The game was incredible. It had it all. So it had a really immensely compelling story with amazing cutscenes. Turn-based combat was pretty good. It was really engaging. It had heaps of side quests. The world was huge. You could explore it. There was, the world building, character design. It was cool. Like, it was such a good game. It was so much fun. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was incredible. I never beat Sephiroth at the end because I unfortunately whizzed through the game too fast. I wasn't strong enough. You couldn't go back right at the end from memory, so I would have had to play it all over again, and I just didn't want to put in the time investment to do it. That was a shame, but my brother did, so I got to see the ending. So, but it had a lot. And the Final Fantasy series, a lot of did, and I never played 8. A lot of people canned it, but I played 9. Was also probably just as good in my opinion, and it was an incredible game. But these games were great because they gave you an immersive storytelling experience. But the kicker for the gaming companies at the time when they made them is the games themselves, to be successful, they had to be perfect when they were released, or as close to as possible, because the gaming companies had one shot to make an absolutely amazing game, because if you blew it, you were done. These weren't live service games, so you couldn't regularly patch and update and implement new changes to accommodate gamers' requests and fix bugs and all that sort of thing. If you release, especially console games or any games back then, CD-ROM, because we had none of this stuff where you could just download it online back in the day. Like, you had to make sure that game was going to be good, and especially for the investments they were putting in. Like Final Fantasy, cost about 50 million to make at the time, which is roughly 88 to 90 million now with inflation taken into account. So that was not cheap, but look how amazing an experience it was. So dozens of hours to reach full completion. The game had amazing visuals, an immersive and compelling plot. You'll remember for years to come, like, there's still memes. Everybody remembers the characters still. Cloud was a badass, Sephiroth was a badass, the girls. I was never really into the girls myself, but everybody loves Tifa. So, look how incredible a gaming culture that spawned and how much people love it. So, it was a fantastic game, and same with Final Fantasy IX. So they just left you wanting more even when you finished them. So with the focus on live service, especially due to the monetization models, the storytelling aspect of gaming just seems to have massively fallen away in recent times. So take Blizzard as an example. So with the focus on live service due to their monetization models, the storytelling aspect of games just seems to have massively fallen away in recent times. So a prime example, in my opinion, would be Blizzard. I remember when Warcraft and Starcraft, obviously, franchise as well as Diablo 1 and 2, and was some of the most memorable game experiences that I've ever experienced, and I still remember them fondly back in today. So. But Diablo 4 came out, even back to Diablo 3 to be honest, but Diablo 4, I think visually it's a great game. The open world concept was pretty cool, but 6 to 8 hour playthrough of Diablo 4 that nobody wanted to play through again. They had to patch out and say that you didn't have to play the main campaign again every time you started a character, which was a good option. But if you don't want to play the main quest line of a game like Diablo, which is very story driven, doesn't that mean the story's a bit lacking? To be honest, the main quest line of Diablo 4 just simply felt like a longer than usual side quest. It must ask the question, where have all the good storytellers in gaming gone? So the most recent example of games to take the world by storm would of course be Baldur's Gate 3. It's an incredible game, but not a AAA title. Elden Ring, Sekiro, Dark Souls, of course, all that same line of games. Great and immersive storytelling and gameplay. Were the games perfect? Absolutely not, but they were immersive enough and enjoyable enough that people just kept wanting to play them and get their way through them, which is fantastic, and that's what you want from a game. Like, you don't care if the graphics aren't perfect, if there's little bugs, if the gameplay and the storytelling is immersive, fun and enjoyable, gamers are going to want to play it no matter what the game's about, who's in it, who's represented, who's not represented, and so forth. So even if you're trying to sell stuff constantly through the game, it's okay as long as the game is fun. But games these days just can't compare to games in the old days, mostly. And of course there are good titles coming out, but they seem few and far between. And in my opinion, that would come mostly due to the prevalence and over-emphasis on monetization, especially obviously in live service games. So the push for live service models has, in my opinion, been a major contributor to the downfall in quality of these AAA studios. Live service itself isn't a bad thing, of course. So for me personally, I'm a League of Legends tragic. I've been playing since season 1. And I enjoy playing a number of other live service titles with my mates as well. But it's the monetization models as well as the implementation of such that causes the most disdain within the communities, as in most cases it's simply a blatant cash grab from the developers on top of charging AAA prices, and that's the kicker. You pay, Diablo 4 is a good example, you're paying $70 for the game and $70 for a horse skin, which I'll touch on a bit in a minute, but if you're paying $70 for a game in the first place, you should, or dare I say, you should not be scammed or preyed upon by these monetization models. Monetization in itself for live service isn't something to necessarily be derided, so it's obviously necessary for some of our favourite titles to continue operating and to keep the service running, obviously. So as a LoL player, I've definitely spent too much on cosmetics. I shudder to think how much I used to spend. I don't so much anymore, occasionally I do. But I used to indulge a bit too much when I first started, but I've definitely got more than my money's worth due to the amount of game time and hours that I've played the game over the last over a decade now, since 2011 I think I started playing. So of course, while there's some very successful sales tactics within LoL's monetization model, the game itself isn't pay to win, which is really important, and there's never a need to actually buy anything to begin with, at least not anymore. So all the champions can be grinded out with enough games. There's still the free rotation, you can get free skins if you play enough, but the old model didn't give you anything for free. If you wanted you got champions, but that was the only thing you could unlock for free. Everything else you had to pay for. So they've actually improved their monetization model to give people more reward for playing the game more often, which is actually stunning in itself in the current climate of gaming companies trying to take every penny that you've got. So it's good to see that they've relaxed their model a bit, although there is talk about them potentially tightening that up according to Necrit, but we'll talk about that in another video. But Helldivers 2 is also another good example of a monetization model done right. So the new armors in the paid passes are mostly available on the free one. But there are a few items that aren't. However, you can grind out the super credits just simply by playing the game or unlocking them in the free pass. And then you can unlock that paid premium pass as well for free, just for playing the game. Yeah, you can unlock all those items for free as well. And it doesn't run out of time. So think of battle passes in every other game. You've got X amount of weeks or a couple of months to get through them. Helldivers 2 have already said that these passes will be there forever once you start them, so you never feel pressured to finish them in a certain amount of time. So hallelujah for that. Thank you very much, Arrowhead. I think that's amazing that you've actually considered people's lives outside of simply playing games, so that's much appreciated. For me, it's the perceived predatory practices of some gaming companies that appears to be ruffling the most feathers amongst the gaming community. So again, going back to Diablo 4, for instance, they're selling coloured portals pack for $30, and the Vitreous Scourge, the new horse skin, is more than the base game itself, which is dumbfounding to me that they would actually release that. But there's clearly a market for it there, and I understand the thought process of, well, you don't have to buy it, and I prescribe to that theory as well. I'm not a person who thinks, well, it's crazy that they're doing this, shut them down, rah. No, I don't think that, but I do have an issue with it in this regard. So like I said, you could argue that they have no bearing on the actual gameplay itself, so just don't buy them, and yes, I fully agree with that statement. But the issue for me lies with the most hardcore fans. So these people are generally shut-ins who probably don't go out much, don't have friends, or at least not many, and they're addicted to this game. And they have to have the new thing all the time. So these are the ones who will waste their money on cosmetics like this when they could simply buy a new game to kill their time with, or actually go out and do a real world activity, but they're spending $70+ on a horse skin for Diablo 4, so they probably don't have a lot of friends to begin with, and these are the ones that they're going to be preyed upon or people that simply can't stop spending money. So that's wherein the issue lies with me. I mean, unless so many people stop playing the game, they simply have to charge $70 for a horse skin to turn a profit, or they may as well just shut down all the servers. So pretty crazy, but power to them if there's a market for it, because there clearly is with Diablo Immortal. But of course, the saturation in the market of live service games looking for a cash grab has basically led to, or at least had a partial lead to the explosion of the indie scene over recent years. So and in my belief, it's because these games don't generally ask you to open your wallet the second you load the game and get straight to the main menu. So the games themselves are usually priced a lot more appropriately than the more popular titles, and you get a lot more variation from game to game. Players tend to find themselves enjoying a fresh and unique experience whenever they pick up something new. So it's not a rehash of the same games like Call of Duty 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Infinity over and over again, things like that constantly getting rolled out. It's just the same tired gaming experience with the same core mechanics. It's just reskin levels. You only have to look at games like FIFA, coming out every year. It's crazy that people still keep buying it. There's obviously a market for it there for casual gamers. So power to the gaming companies, but in my opinion, it's a pretty lazy method of just reskinning and updating jumper numbers and sending them out. But hey, if there's a market there, you may as well please it. But for indie games, it's of course not to say it's all sunshine and rainbows, obviously. You still need to wade through plenty, and I mean plenty of trash to get to the treasure. And then of course there's the four horsemen of the indie gaming apocalypse that you regularly come up against. Dare I say it, open world, survival, crafting, and early access. So remember that four horsemen of the indie gaming apocalypse. But of course there's a few diamonds in the rough. So two of the biggest titles in the last 12 months, of course, being Palworld and Enshrouded. That's exactly what they are. So open world, survival, crafting, and early access. But if you have a good concept and you can execute it correctly, gamers will flock to your release. So it's the old adage, if you build it, they'll come. It's as simple as that. Make a good game, people want to play it. Price it reasonably, even better. $8 million to make Palworld. They made, nearly $400 million at this stage. $200 million to make Suicide Squad kills the Justice League, and they've got 500 or so concurrent players at the moment. So, lesson to be learned for big studios in that one, we hope. With all that said, where do we go from here? So, how do AAA studios regain the mantle of respect from gamers that they used to enjoy? Well, put simply, they need to revisit their roots and rediscover what made them the pinnacle of gaming to begin with. So, profits are important for any private company, so of course it's understandable that this will be a major priority, but putting the shareholders before the gaming community has only served to backfire spectacularly on many occasions in recent years, and it seems to be happening more frequently than ever. But, of course, while gamers keep buying titles that are unfinished, unworthy of being called a AAA title to begin with, pumping themselves up to be the first quadruple A title in the case of Skull and Bones, as well as compromising gameplay for monetized cosmetics, these huge gaming studios will continue to take the easy route instead of simply creating epic and amazing games to entertain their target audience for years to come. Although with the gigantic losses of money and mass layoffs in the industry recently, it appears the wheel may finally be starting to turn. But anyway, what do you think? I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment, like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye for now.